Hello and welcome to the Jackcast, your Swansea City podcast. Happy New Year to you all. I hope you all had a good Christmas. I am Steve Carroll, of course, and joining me this week is Tom Coleman from Wales Online, the Swansea City reporter for Wales Online. How are you, Tom? Thanks for joining me.
Hi, Steve. Thanks for having me. Happy New Year to you and to everyone listening.
Indeed, I echo those thoughts. There's much to get through tonight, so we won't let the grass grow. We've got quite a few games. Managerial talk, although that has now subsided. One defender signing the contract, the other up in the air, and of course a trip to Southampton in the Cup. So let's crack on. We'll start with the Hull game. That was the one that was furthest to go. Tom, not a good Swansea performance, that one, to say the least. But we probably should have known. Hull not won in 13. The Swansea way is 100% to then end that type of run. And we did it in flying colours. It was a poor performance, to say the least, wasn't it?
It was. I think I said at the time it was one of the worst of the Luke Williams era. I think. Thought the scoreline kind of flattered Swansea really. Luke Williams, I think, summed it up quite nicely. That when they did equalise to Harry Darling, he couldn't even bring himself to celebrate because the first half was so poor, and I think that spoke volumes really. No, it was just a really disjointed, lethargic performance, just lacking that usual zip that you kind of hope for, and that Swansea has have shown glimpses of, I guess, in spells this season. But no, I think, as you say, it was probably always going to happen given Hull's record. But no, it was a very, very poor day at the office, and I think the anger that Luke Williams felt probably was mirrored by those mad enough to go all that way, and watch what was, well, as I said earlier, an absolutely dreadful and abject performance. But
Yep.
I guess Swansea have bounced back of sorts since then, which is quite nice. But yeah, not one to remember fondly, definitely.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, there was a lot of sloppiness, wasn't there? I mean, look at the ball being given away cheaply. I mean, the winning goal was a mistake from Vigor, who's usually been pretty good this season, although we will go on to talk about another mistake of his shortly, no doubt. But it was just really poor, wasn't it? And frustrated. I mean, and a bad start really to a hectic period. And I do sympathise with anyone that went all the way to Hull, particularly with it being such an early kick-off. The wake-up call would have been grim for that. And there was ultimately no reward. I was just relieved that I was in the pub instead and hadn't made that journey. But Boxing Day was significantly better, wasn't it? I mean, a visit from QPR had been on a really good run, and that ended in quite spectacular fashion. The Swans 3 up by half-time, playing some really good football. One of the goals in particular, finished off by Liam Cullen, was a wonderful move. A goal for Franco as well, which was great. It was just that first half was the polar opposite, really, of the Hull game, wasn't it? It's I suppose it does show with the hot and cold nature of this division, and certainly what the Swans seem to be like at the moment, doesn't it?
Definitely, and I think in some respects it encapsulates Swansea's season so far. Really, it's just kind of where this team is at the moment. They will occasionally produce some good things, and then occasionally produce some really poor things. And I don't think that's. I think it comes down to that lack of squad depth that I think I've mentioned a couple of times before when I've been on this podcast. I think a lack of depth and perhaps even a lack of quality at times. Certainly can't fault the effort, I think, from Swansea, but yeah, I as you said, that first half against QPR, it was so important to have a response after that whole game. That was the perfect response really to have. But again, I think, not for the first time, I got the feeling that Swansea kind of tailed off a little bit after half time. And I don't know if that's because maybe they thought the job was done, or is it down to the fact that it's so difficult to maintain that level of intensity for 90 minutes? I mean, perhaps it's a combination of both, but I think if you're going to be critical of that game, then the drop off in intensity after halftime would probably be the key point to make there. But even so, I think that's being a little bit nitpicky. It was a vastly improved performance, and Liam Cullen on the score sheet again. That change of role has really, really suited him, hasn't it? And we're really, really starting to see the best of him now. And he's certainly proved me wrong. I didn't see this run of form this season coming, and I didn't see this goal scoring record coming. But he's really, really thriving at the moment.
Yeah, he really is, isn't he? I think the injury to Ollie Cooper and there's just the general lack of depth did create a bit of a headache really for Swansea, I would say. But Liam Cullen has dropped deeper and has scored quite a few, and to be fair, created a few as well. So it's really it seems to be in the making of a bit at the moment. This has to be, I would say, the best spell of his Swansea career and obviously his career in total so far. And obviously there were a couple of goals for Wales and assists as well in the home win over Montenegro a couple of months back now. So it does feel as if Cullen really is coming into his own at the moment. I mean, the second half there, I think it is a fair point to say that it did tail off slightly. It was a bit of a non-event really, the second half, but at the same time, the job was done. I think the only issue would have been if QPR had got one back. You do worry that it could have led to something purely because it did feel like the intensity had dropped a bit. But I think sometimes it's only natural for that to happen, especially in what is a hectic period at Christmas where we had 5 games in 15 days really in total. Then, so I'm not going to be too critical of that, but certainly it wasn't a 90-minute performance. I think that's fair to say. Obviously, a few days later then, Luton visited South Wales. They're obviously on a really poor run away from home. And they were given a gift, really, to start with, weren't they, from Vigouroux with a poor pass, which was well controlled by Carlton Morris and slotted in. But, after that, from my point of view, especially in the first half, the Swans were the better side, deserved to draw level. But, once the red card came in the second half, there was a lot of pressure. Didn't really think a winner was going to come, but obviously it did right at the end. So that was a brilliant feeling. I mean, what did you think of the performance against Luton, Tom? I would say it wasn't as good as the QPR one, but I think there were certainly quite a few positives from that first half, minus the goal particularly. I think maybe the second wasn't as good.
I think I'd agree with you, to be honest. I think after that opening Luton goal, Swansea kind of controlled the game, really. And I think there probably was a sense of frustration around it felt, didn't it, for quite a while that Swansea were going to be knocking on the door all afternoon and not find that winning goal, and then to get it so late on. I think you can't really have too many complaints with that from a Luton point of view. It's interesting you mentioned a red card. I mean, I think Mr. Mark McGuinness probably got off a little bit lightly for his challenge on Gonzalo Franco. I don't know if you've seen the pictures of Gonzalo since, but it's pretty.
It was bad, wasn't it?
It's pretty tasty, shall we say the least. And what I found, and I'm sure we'll come on to the next game in a second, but what I found absolutely slightly mind-boggling was Luke was talking about the fact that he might have even fractured his jaw, and then to see him essentially dust himself off and play in the next game was pretty incredible. And I don't know if Luke's maybe just exaggerating a little bit and having a little joke with us all. I don't know, but certainly it looked a nasty one. And when you watch the replays back, I mean, I'm not sure how much malice is really there, but I've seen referees at least give a yellow for that. And I think on another day, you could probably maybe consider Mark McGuinness slightly lucky to have effectively got away with it. I don't know, but that was perhaps one thing that there was a big talking point. But a late goal, nice to see Swansea keep going until the very end. The first of a couple of late goals that we've seen over the festive period, actually. But like I said, I think Swansea in the end were pretty good value for it. Luton didn't really create an awful lot, didn't really trouble Swansea an awful lot. But I think with when you cast your mind back to that goal drought and Swansea's huffing and puffing the longer it went on, there was a part of you that kind of probably thought, well, are Swansea actually going to find that winning goal? But thankfully it arrived, and that to get back-to-back wins at home, that certainly went a long way to lifting the mood from, as we just mentioned, the disastrous performance up at Hull.
Yeah, exactly. And to be fair, our home record hasn't probably been as good as we would have wanted it to be this season. It was obviously we had the win over Preston early on, and then Norwich. I think it was Watford we beaten, but since then, I don't know if there's actually been another home win. So you think of it, to get to Christmas when we only had 3 home wins is quite disappointing. So I think it's very important that we managed to get a couple on the board there. And as you say, I think we were good value for it. It just yeah, I must admit, I didn't think the winner was coming. It felt like we were huffing and puffing, but not really doing a lot. But to be fair, when the crosses come in, Darling's got a great header, and Pert Harris has then had the follow-up header. And yeah, I think we certainly deserved it. But yeah, I think those ones are always the best. I'm sure most of the listeners will agree when you get a league winner. There's not quite a feeling like it, is there? We've had a few of them down the years. One up the road a couple of years ago springs to mind. I'll mention that because the derby's on the horizon. But yeah, moving on then. So that was the final game of 2024. We started 2025 with a first trip to Portsmouth for nearly 14 years. A team we seem to have avoided really through our rise through the divisions. They seem to go the other way, but we are now in the same league. I mean, there was a fair amount of optimism going down there. I mean, because done a draw with them a few short weeks ago, but really should have won the game, and we certainly would have had enough chances to win the game. So I felt reasonably optimistic travelling down to Fratton Park, but yeah, my optimism was very misplaced. It was a disastrous day, really, to say the least. Miserable conditions and just a miserable day. I mean, Tom, what do you think went wrong? I mean, it just felt to me, as particularly at the game, as like Swansea were really struggling to get out of their own half. They were, obviously trying to play out. Then you had Fulton not particularly dropping deep enough, so then you were leaving exposed with lack of options, and obviously some individual errors as well. And yeah, we just couldn't really get out, and it just led to a bad performance and result, really.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I've just realised actually, Franco didn't play in that game, did he? It was the next one, wasn't it? So just to just to clarify that. But even so, still not bad going for a fractured jaw. Anyway, Portsmouth. Yeah, I don't know. It was quite a strange game, really, because it was one of those where there were spells where I didn't think Swansea actually played that badly, but just too many costly individual errors at crucial moments. I mean, I know it's probably a bit of a cop out as well, but I don't think the weather helped. The conditions were quite difficult for them. Certainly not conducive to a possession-based game anyway. And then, of course, by that point you had the unhelpful sideshow of all the speculation around Luke Williams, and he'd already failed to bat away the speculation after the Luton game, and then again, when your team's been walloped 4-0, I think probably exacerbated the situation in a way that he probably didn't need to. So, I mean, I mentioned the sort of optimism and feel-good factor that came on the back of those 2 back-to-back home wins. I mean, couldn't really have felt any further away coming away from Fratton Park. But yeah, I mean, I can't remember if it was the first or second goal now with it was a mistake from Darling. Just really, really poor basic stuff at the back, and yeah, it just looked like a team that had perhaps was in a bit of a need of a reset, a bit of a rest. There are a lot of games around this time of year, and I think maybe this was just a step too far for them. I also think as well, Portsmouth are still a pretty good side. They gave Swansea a really good run for their money down at their place, and they're quite strong at home at Fratton Park as well. But even so, the manner of a 4-0 defeat was just so disheartening, and I think it was yeah, it was just a really, really flat way to start 2025, wasn't it? And then, like I said, with all the stuff going around with Luke, which I'm sure we'll talk about in a sec, um, yeah, just it was the start of, I think, a very difficult few days for the club.
Yeah, it probably was, wasn't it? I mean, it's always terrible to lose 4-0. I think that goes without saying, doesn't it? And then, yeah, I mean, I think from my point of view, I think Luke Williams was a little bit naive with his comments saying that, they won't want me anyway after like a 4-0 like loss. I mean, I just think it was naive rather than him particularly looking to go elsewhere. That was my instinct. I mean, if you get asked questions about other jobs, you've just got to play the game a bit and just say something along the lines of like, "Oh, I'm sure West Brom is a good job, but luckily I'm already in a good job." Anything like that, really. And I mean, to an extent, I think words sometimes there's, how can I put this? I always look at Roberto Martinez when he was Swansea manager saying that I was kicked out as a player, it'll be the same as a manager. And then in about a year after that, he left for Wigan. And you're just thinking, you have to take a lot of these comments with a pinch of salt because it is a job to most people. They are in it for themselves. And if you get offered a better one, like in most cases, most people are going to take them. So you've got to be realistic. But I just think he was naive. That's the word I'm probably looking for. I mean, what do you think, Tom?
Well, I mean, I would agree, really. I mean, I can understand why so many people were quite miffed at some of the comments that Luke was making. But at the same time, I think responses to these kind of questions, and I think you've touched upon it there with Martinez. It's always a bit performative, isn't it? It's always a bit kind of, even if you did, how many managers have we seen, not just Martinez, but over the years, say, "Oh, perfectly happy here. I'm staying here. Blah blah blah. Here for the long haul." Um, Dismissing speculation, and then sometimes even a few days later, find themselves up at a new club. What's said publicly, in cases like this, what's said to the media and in public seldom really affects what's going on behind the scenes. And obviously there was a lot of talk about what was going on behind the scenes, and I'm not sure we'll ever really know exactly what happened. For the record, everyone I spoke to on this story said either dismissed it or said that Luke wasn't going anywhere. Swansea, I think, from the very beginning of this sort of saga, were very, very confident that Luke was going to stay, and certainly there was no sort of approach or anything, or official approach, I should say, from West Brom, either to Swansea or Luke's camp. But I think the other point that I think people need to remember here as well is that, and obviously Luke got a fair amount of stick from some corners of social media, and some of it pretty vicious, to be honest, and dare I say, a little bit over the top. But I think one of the things that people need to remember is that agents, and whether it be for managers or players or whatever, they talk to other clubs all the time, and that's not necessarily an indication that someone's going to go somewhere. Um, so it's perfectly possible that Luke was either on a list at West Brom, or maybe his agent has sort of explored the situation there, trying to find out what's going on. But that's not the same as trying to get Luke to West Brom, if that makes sense. But having said all that, I think it was still a very unhelpful saga over the last few days, and perhaps has sadly dented some of the goodwill that Luke has had with the fans. But there's only one way to get that back, isn't it? And that's to win football matches.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's good that it's been cleared up. From my point of view, Luke Williams has done a good job, and obviously he's been here just over a year now. He is building something slowly. It would have been a real shame if he'd left. So from my point of view, I just hope that he stays here for a good while yet, and we continue to try and build, really. So I think we should just need to put this whole episode behind us. I mean, this is football. The fact is, if people are getting linked to other jobs, it should be taken as a compliment. It's far better than when all of us were probably praying someone might want Michael Duff, and the chances of that were very, very slim. So yeah, it is what it is. But just one last game to move on to then, and that was a game with West Brom on Saturday, just gone. It felt really flat at the game. I don't know if you felt that, Tom, but I know you were saying about one too many at Portsmouth. It certainly felt a bit like that to me. What, one game too many? I mean, obviously the Portsmouth game was on the Wednesday. I mean, it was, just under 3 days later. Then we're going again. I mean, I felt flat after, a really disappointing day on the South Coast and probably not ready to go to another game. But it did just feel quite flat, although it wasn't a bad game. Like, certainly for a neutral, it didn't feel like there were quite a few chances, particularly in the first half.
Yeah, I thought it was. I would agree it was flat, and I don't know how much the speculation around Luke perhaps played into that as well. I mean, it's sod's law, isn't it, that they would have to play West Brom so close to all of this talk around it. But no, I think it was. It was. I think it was a pretty good end to, as I said, what was a difficult week. I mean, certainly, I thought West Brom were probably thinking that they might have done enough to win that game. Although, as you said, Swansea started quite well. But for them to get that late equaliser, that Joe Allen goal just felt big for a few reasons, really. Firstly, it's nice to see Joe back on the score sheet. I think that was his first goal since March. And second of all, I think it just gave the place a bit of a lift. You could kind of feel that sort of tension and that sort of that kind of flat atmosphere lift a little bit. And I think had they not got that goal, I'm not quite sure. Not quite sure how the feelings would have compounded and how the talk around Luke would have really died down as much as it thankfully now has. But I thought there were spells when Swansea competed really, really well with West Brom, and West Brom. But let's remember are one of those teams in the top six that Swansea are aspiring to go compete with. And I thought went toe to toe with them quite well. I think they had to weather a bit of a storm at times. Of course they did. You're always going to have to when you play these kind of teams. But it was. I keep coming back to it, but after a difficult few days, it was just a really nice way to round things off, I guess. A really nice header as well. Nice to see Ronaldo get an assist. I thought that was actually one of his better games, bombing up and down the right. Lovely dink cross for Allen's header, and the glancing finish on it was really, really pleasing to watch. And I just hope that and I speaking to Luke after the game. He was very keen to sort of say, look, let's just draw a line under this speculation and everything, and let's try and move on. And I think that goal probably made that a lot easier than had he come in on the back of a 1-0 defeat.
Yeah, definitely. I was actually cursing when Joe Allen came on, not in a bad way, but it was more because Cullen went off, and I was just thinking, well, how on earth are we going to get a goal in this situation? Because as much as I love Joe, he's not usually known for his goal scoring. But so Luke Williams did make me look a bit stupid as that. Not as stupid as the West Brom fans chanting Joe Allen, we thought you were dead, and then they realised a couple of minutes later that he certainly was not dead. A great header, as you said. I don't remember Joe Allen ever scoring a header, but either way, certainly not complaining. I mean, so overall, over the festive period, 7 points from 5 games. I mean, I'd have to say, I think that's a decent return. I did think if we were looking for playoffs, we probably needed more like 10. So we have fallen a bit short of that. I mean, how would you assess it, Tom? I mean, it's 7 from 5. It's just bang average mid-table, really, isn't it? Which is exactly where Swansea are.
Yeah, unfortunately, I think you're right. I mean, this is another comment that I'm a bit confused at with Luke Williams, and that he's eased off it a little bit now, but he has kind of talked up this team for top 6, in my opinion, a little bit too much. I think Swansea have got some good players in that squad, and they've definitely got players who could get into a top 6 side. But I just keep coming back to the strengthening depth to maintain a playoff challenge. I just don't think it's there. And I think Swansea are just going to have these good weeks and these bad weeks. I think that's probably just going to continue. Obviously, January is an opportunity to strengthen some key areas, particularly at centre back, which I'm sure we'll come on to in a bit. But in terms of the Christmas period, it's kind of as expected, I would argue. I think had you come out of that with 10 points, the talk around the playoffs might have gone up a little bit, gone up a notch a little bit. But this, I mean, despite me being a bit of a Debbie Downer on it all, they are still within touching distance of it, and you just never know. I mean, if they put a decent run together, there's always that one team, isn't there, that surges in from absolutely nowhere. And obviously, I think it's a bit harsh to say Swansea would have come from absolutely nowhere, considering that, like I said, they are still within touching distance of it. But my personal view is I wouldn't be surprised to see Swansea still around the conversation at some point. But I just think that lack of depth in certain areas is going to catch up with them eventually.
Yeah, that's how I see it, really. I mean, you look at the fixtures that we did have over the festive period. I mean, West Brom were easily the best side to come down here. I mean, QPR and Luton are in the bottom half, as are Hull and Portsmouth. So you've got to be taking more points against those teams, I think, really, if you're going to get in there. Plus the fact that I think that I don't know I haven't looked at the table now in terms of exactly where everybody is, but there was that stat, wasn't there? We picked up no points against the top 7 or something. So obviously I know West Brom, we've got one off now, but it feels like we're not going to pick the points up against those teams. And as you say, really, I mean, it is down to that lack of depth. I mean, I look at Portsmouth and think that Cal Norton just looks about a yard off the pace. It's getting on a bit now. I mean, it's not a shock. I mean, he's been a great servant. But, if people like him are coming in, then, you can't fully trust them, I don't think, anymore. And I think, unfortunately, Jay Fulton was really poor at Portsmouth, and I wouldn't want him in the team. And this is it, when one or two people are out, the backup isn't so good. So, I think for Swansea, they need to try and bring a couple in the transfer window. I think to have playoffs, they'd have to bring 3 players in that may well be starters or something like that, really. But, I mean, how do you see the transfer window? I mean, there's been reports of Joe Lowe from Wickham, isn't there? Do you think that's a possibility? As you said, I mean, we are crying out for a centre half now with Ben Cabango being injured, and of course, Cyrus Christie ended up playing a centre back against West Brom with Nelson Abbey returning to his parent club. I mean, we are desperate at centre back, especially, aren't we?
Yeah, absolutely. I think regardless of the Darling situation, the Swansea desperately needs some cover there. I mean, I know he didn't really play at all, but the departure of Nelson Abbey has only exacerbated it a little bit further, in my opinion. Carl Norton has been a tremendous servant to the football club, but he can't be playing centre back week in, week out until the end of the season. It's just not viable. I mean, you would hope that wouldn't be the case anyway, because hopefully Cabango is going to be back sooner rather than later. But I don't see how you could squeeze out 90 minutes from a Carl Norton or a Cyrus Christie on a regular basis. And that's not any slight on them. They just they're just at a stage of their careers now where they don't necessarily have the legs anymore. And I think they both still have something good to offer, I think, but I don't think you can lean on them too heavily. So centre back is definitely somewhere where they need to strengthen, and it's certainly a top priority. I think the club recognise the need to strengthen there too. You mentioned Joe Lowe. I mean, it's my understanding that Swansea have made a second bid for him. We'll see what happens with that. Wickham, for understandable reasons, are reluctant to sanction a sale. I think it's really just going to come down to value, really, and whether Swansea and Wickham can reach some kind of agreement. Wickham have already signed 2 centre backs in this window. I know they've lost one as well, but the movement elsewhere certainly suggests that they're perhaps preparing themselves for Joe Lowe leaving. But he's a hugely important player to them. He's played every single minute of their League One campaign, and they're absolutely flying there, aren't they? They're second, I think, in the table. But I think Swansea would definitely tick a lot of boxes. Joe is obviously originally from Cardiff, but I think the chance to return to South Wales, I think, would probably count in Swansea's favour in terms of persuading him to come back, and a chance to be closer to the Wales setup as well. He's really keen to try and make that step up and really force his way into Craig Bellamy's plans. And if his trajectory of his career goes as I think many people are expecting it to, I think we'll probably see a lot more of him in a Wales shirt. But you can never say anything's going to happen with any kind of certainty in January. And I'm sure you don't need me to tell you that Swansea have had some pretty eventful Januaries down the years. So I wouldn't put your house on it just yet, but I think there's definitely a growing level of confidence that one will get done.
That's interesting, because I'm actually of the opinion I don't think it will be, mainly because I just find it odd that Wickham would particularly entertain bids when they're in the situation that they're in. I think they might be more likely to gamble, even if it meant they lost him in the summer, really, because they're in a really good position, and selling him could derail them, really. But I mean, as ever, money talks, doesn't it? If the money's good enough, I'm sure he would go. But I get the impression that they'll dig in for more than they would if, let's say, they were in mid-table. They'd probably accept less money, you would think, and then there'd probably be a better chance of the deal getting done, really. But time will tell, as it always does. It wouldn't shock me if it goes towards the end of the window for that one. I mean, what other positions do you think are needed, really? I mean, I'm looking at it and just thinking, I think midfield could be one in the centre, because Joe Allen is struggling to stay fit, really, isn't he? And obviously we've already seen with Franco going out that if Fulton has to come in, that could be a problem. I mean, and then I'm looking at out wide, really. Still think we have issues there, and I mean, you could even argue up top is not great either. I mean, it certainly feels like Swansea still need to rebuild a bit more over the next couple of windows, doesn't it?
Yeah, definitely. I don't expect them to do a huge amount of business in January, but it's interesting to say out wide and in the centre of midfield. I think those are definitely two areas that the club are looking at. But I don't expect any wholesale surgery in this window, no.
Yeah, I think that's the usual, really, isn't it? You never seem to get too much in January. It's rare you would sign probably more than a couple of players, but yeah, look, hopefully there will be some business, and obviously one or two might go. We've already seen that Andy Fisher has gone, which makes sense, because I think there was no chance that he was going to play here. So yeah, he's gone off to St Johnstone. I mean, we've already touched on Cabango and Darlin, but obviously Cabango has signed a new contract. That happened on Christmas Eve, or it was revealed on Christmas Eve, I should say. Obviously, that has to be considered as good news, doesn't it? I mean, you could look at it from another way as well. From a financial fair play point of view, you wouldn't want to lose a homegrown player for nothing, because if a chance comes to sell him further down the line, it looks better on the books for pure profit, and gives you an opportunity to bring other players in, such as the world that we're living in at the moment, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. I think tying him down was a huge bit of business for the club. Obviously now attention's probably going to turn to Harry Darling, although it sounds to me like those talks are kind of on the back burner a bit. I think Harry might well be considering his options at the moment, which is, I think from a professional point of view, fair enough, really. He's been in great form overall this season. Yeah, I think that's a difficult one. I certainly think Swansea are probably at least entertaining the idea that they might not have him beyond the summer now. Although Luke Williams certainly seems optimistic that there's still an agreement there to be reached. We're just going to have to wait and see, really. It's something that, how many times though have we seen before that Swansea have got themselves into this position? And it's frustrating to see them in this position again. But we've but here we are, and hopefully it will get sorted.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I would, from my point of view, I'd actually rather keep Darlin than Cabango on the face of it. I think he is the better player, but I do also look at it from the FFP point of view of we needed Cabango as well. But I mean, as you say, Tom, I'm fed up now of us getting to a stage where we can lose people for nothing. It's just not good business practice. So I'm really hoping that the club look at the likes of Josh Key and Josh Timon, that I think their contracts will expire in 18 months or so, and look to try and open negotiations and get them signed hopefully before the end of the season, so we don't end up in this situation again, really, because like I say, we've lost, like Ryan Manning was one that we lost on a free a little while ago, and that was poor business from our point of view. I do understand that sometimes in the case of him, he signed the contract when we were still on parachute payments, so maybe you can't match it then. But yeah, I think sometimes you're better off trying to cash in on people, even if you don't make a huge amount of money, just to try and then maybe reinvest it a little bit, because certainly isn't good business to lose people for nothing. And if I'm honest, I think with Darling now, them shelving contract talks until the summer, I'm not hugely optimistic that he's going to sign. But until he has signed on the dotted line elsewhere, we'll wait and see. But either way, he's going to be a massive player for us for the rest of the season, particularly now with Cabango out injured at the moment. So yeah, just moving on then to the last thing. We've had much to discuss. A trip to Southampton in the FA Cup. So this game is on Sunday. It won't go to a replay. It will be settled on the day. So what do you make then, Tom? A trip to Southampton, not a great one, I would say, for the Swans, and I can't see them taking it hugely seriously, to be honest with you, either.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, isn't it? Because I mean, this is a game I think either side probably would make the argument that they could do without. I mean, Southampton, to be fair, look completely doomed. So I guess there is an argument there of the FA Cup perhaps offering some joy. But you know, from a Swansea point of view, I'm not sure how high it is in the list of priorities. I expect changes. I don't think there'll be too many changes though, mainly because, and it keeps coming back to this depth of the squad. I don't know how many changes you realistically could make, really. I expect John McLaughlin to start in goal. Luke's been saying last couple of press conferences that he's pushing to start, which I think is probably a hint that he'll probably be involved in some capacity. It's just a shame Russell Martin's not still there, because I think that's really kind of dented the narrative around it and perhaps dented some of the interest. But I think from a Swansea point of view, it would be interesting to see what kind of team selection Luke goes with, because there's definitely an argument to be had that Southampton are there for the taking, and you would say that Swansea have probably got the ability to hurt them, but it's just with a derby around the corner, how full throttle do you go? Yeah, it'd be very interesting to see how Luke plays this one.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think it is interesting who is going to play. I mean, I look at the Wickham game in the League Cup, and a few players got chances in that didn't impress. And you're thinking, well, if we had a lower league team, maybe a few of them, like, I don't know, Pedersen and Tojo would get a chance. But I mean, I'm not really sure you can take that type of risk in a game like this, because we could end up taking a real hiding. Even though Southampton are struggling, as you say, but I think some of those players are just so far out of their depth that they would really struggle. It'll be, I think, if we did a sweepstake for the starting 11 on Sunday, it'll be very difficult for anybody to get it 100% right. But yeah, I think we will see changes. I mean, I could see, as you say, McLaughlin starting in goal. I think Norton may well play. Fulton will probably play. And Kurt Harris has been out of the team recently, certainly his starting point of view. Might come in. Vipotnik hasn't played a huge amount. I'm looking those players might play. And then you could see someone like Grimes playing, just because when doesn't he play? It's pretty much every game, isn't it? Joe Allen, maybe. They certainly should be thinking about giving him at least half an hour as a sub, I would say. But it depends. But I mean, let's do a little score prediction then. I think I'm going to say that Southampton are probably going to win 2-0. That's my instinct. It's hard to say how seriously they're going to take it, really. But the fact that the Swans are not going to take it too seriously, I don't think means that they're very unlikely to win. I mean, can you give any optimism, Tom, before we close?
2-1 Swans after extra time.
Oh, okay, that's interesting. Well, it'd be all right if we have a nice little draw in the next round, but it does mean the trip to Bristol City will be a midweek. I'm just putting that out there for anybody that is eyeing that one up. But if either us or them, I think they've got Wolves. One of us win, then our game with them is off. So not that I'm complaining necessarily about that, but I am just saying. But anyway, we'll wrap this up. It's been a bumper one this week, obviously, because of so much to discuss and not always the amount of time that you have. But then again, if we went into every game in detail, we'd be here for about 2 hours and probably bore you to tears. But thank you very much for joining myself and Tom as we've looked back at the festive period and all the other news that's been going on recently. And we will be back next week, and we'll have the small matter of a South Wales derby to preview. And I'm sure everyone's looking forward to that. So, yeah, thank you for joining us, and bye for now.